All right, let's talk about something we all deal with, one way or another, our hair. Today, we're going to dive deep into the actual science happening on our scalps. We're talking everything from the tiny microscopic factories that build every single strand, all the way to the hormones that can, well, shut the whole operation down. So let's get into it. First up, I want to start with just a number, 50%. Now, what do you think that could be? It's a statistic that probably hits a lot closer to home for more of us than we'd like to admit. And there it is. By the time they turn 50, half of all men and women feel like their hair is thinning out in a major way. And look, this isn't just about looks, right? It can cause some real anxiety. That's why really getting the science behind it is just so important. Okay, so to get to the real science, we've got to clear the air first. We need to get rid of some of the old wives' tales. I mean, there are a million myths about hair loss, but there's one that you hear more than any other. I'm sure you've heard this one before, right? The whole blame your mom's dad thing. And while, yeah, there's a little bit of truth in there, genetics are absolutely the main driver, it is way more complicated than that. The genes that matter actually come from both sides of your family. So if we want to really understand what's going on, we have to look past the myths and dig into the actual biology. So let's get into that core biology. Believe it or not, every single hair on your head is living out its own little secret life cycle. It's all being run by this tiny but incredibly powerful engine that's buried just underneath your skin. And this right here, this is that engine. It's called the hair follicle. The best way to think of it is as a dedicated microscopic factory. And deep inside that factory, you've got a crew of stem cells working around the clock, just building the proteins that become a single strand of hair. Pretty amazing. So this is the factory's production schedule. You can kind of think of it like a 3-act play. Act 1, the main event, is called anagen. This is the growth phase, and it can last for years. This is actually what determines how long your hair can possibly get. Then there's a quick transition, and finally, the follicle enters the telogen, or resting phase. The old hair falls out, and the whole cycle gets ready to start all over again. So if our bodies have this incredible built-in system for growing hair, what goes wrong? Why does it stop working for so many people? Well, it's time to meet the villain of our story. There's a powerful hormone that basically acts like a thief in the night, trying to shut down our little hair factories. And its name is dihydrotestosterone, or just DHT for short. Now, DHT is an incredibly potent hormone that comes from testosterone. And while it's really important for other things in the body, on the scalp, it's public enemy number 1 for any hair follicles that are genetically sensitive to it. So here's how DHT pulls off the heist. It has a 2-pronged attack. First, it chops down that super important anagen growth phase. So hairs that used to grow for years might now only grow for a few months or even weeks. And second, it literally shrinks the factory itself, a process called miniaturization. Over time, the follicle just gets smaller and weaker until eventually it just gives up and stops making hair you can even see. Okay, so if we've identified the bad guy and we know exactly how he operates, that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? How do we fight back? What are our options? What are the solutions? Well, modern science really gives us 2 main strategies, 2 battle plans which are laid out perfectly right here. We can either play defense and support our hair follicles by giving them more nutritions, or we can go on offense and directly block the hormone that's causing all the trouble in the first place. Let's start with strategy number 1. This is the supportive approach. You can think of it like making sure your factory has all the power and all the raw materials it needs to keep running at 100%. The logic here is actually really simple, but it's powerful. That little stem cell factory in the follicle, it's a busy place. It needs a ton of oxygen and nutrients from your blood to keep building hair. So by increasing blood flow to the scalp, we're basically force-feeding the follicles everything they need to stay healthy and productive. And here are 2 really common ways to do just that. On the left, we've got Minoxidil. You probably know it as Rogaine. It's a vasodilator, which is just a fancy way of saying it opens up blood vessels to get more flow. And here's a fun fact. It was actually a blood pressure medication before they realized it had this amazing hair-growing side effect. Then on the right, you've got topical caffeine. I know, it sounds a little weird, but studies show it can also help that growth phase, just by working through a totally different biological pathway. All right, now for our second strategy. This is the direct assault. Instead of just supporting our little factories, this approach is all about neutralizing the hair thief, DHT, right at the source, before it can do any more damage. So how does this work? Simple. We go after the source. See, DHT doesn't just show up out of nowhere. It gets converted from testosterone by a specific enzyme in our bodies. So these treatments work by blocking that enzyme. You block the enzyme, you make less DHT, and that means less damage to your hair follicles. It's really that straightforward. So who are the main players here? Well, Finasteride is the heavy hitter. It's a powerful prescription drug designed specifically to shut down that enzyme. Then you have things like Ketoconazole, which is an antifungal shampoo that happens to have a nice little side effect of mildly blocking DHT on the scalp. And there are even natural options, like saw palmetto, which tries to do the same thing as Finasteride, just on a much, much weaker scale. And this chart really shows you just how effective a powerful DHT blocker can be. I mean, just look at these numbers from clinical studies on Finasteride. We're talking about stopping or even reversing hair loss for up to 90% of men. And on top of that, it can actually increase the number of hairs on your head by about 20%. Those are some seriously impressive results, and they come from targeting the root cause hormone directly. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. We've seen two very different strategies, right? Supporting the follicle with better blood flow versus attacking the hormone that's actually trying to destroy it. So based on the science we've just gone through, which one do you think is actually treating the root cause of hair loss and which one is just treating the symptoms? Because understanding that difference, well, that's the key to making smart choices about your hair's health.